It's almost 60 years since Don Dunstan was first elected to the South Australian Parliament, but people are still talking about him. As Premier of a small state, he transcended local politics to become a national figure, known for both his flamboyance and his agenda-setting social reforms. Now, a major oral history project has drawn together people who knew and worked with Don Dunstan to record their memories of the era. Here's Mike Sexton from Adelaide.
Well, I saw a great many things wrong with society, a great deal of injustice, unacceptable inequality, unacceptable poverty. And I believed that something had to be done about that.
He came to the job at 41 and after almost 3 decades of Conservative rule, blew through the Parliament not so much like a breath of fresh air, but a gale force of reform.
There was no question that what was happening in South Australia in the late 60s and through the 70s was looked at very closely by professional political practitioners. And, you know, from Gough Whitlam through to Neville Wran, and even to a number on the Liberal side, what Dunstan was doing and how he was doing it was looked at very closely and copied.
The Dunstan era is credited with enshrining women's, Indigenous and consumer rights, decriminalising homosexuality and building the arts, notably initiating a renaissance of the Australian film industry.
Go like a wind.
He also then brought initiatives to help promote that creativity of thinking in our community by backing it up with government programs. And the things that were happening, for example, in our education system and in our arts and in general cultural life in South Australia just took off.
And he did it all with a panache that matched the times, from taking to the streets to publicly debate issues to eschewing a suit and tie in Parliament, preferring pink shorts and safari suits.
I think people should have a good sense of dress and of design and of colour and texture and material, and that their clothes should be comfortable and well designed.
It's tailor-made, yes. I think all his clothes were tailor-made. We have a few other bits and pieces.
Have you got his pink shorts?
We don't have the pink shorts, unfortunately. They're still in a private collection, but we're hoping that one day that they will come to us.
Gillian Dooley is a librarian at Flinders University that houses the Don Dunstan collection, a modest room full of documents, photographs and memorabilia.
There are, of course, the official records held in the state records offices, but this collection is very much, you know, what Don gathered together personally, and it's got his notes and his jottings and his books and his diaries and things like that.
The collection is one part of an ongoing movement to preserve his legacy, including a foundation that promotes social reform through public debate.
Don Dunstan used the Premiership of South Australia to challenge elements of that orthodoxy, so I'm pleased to be associated with his spirit and this foundation in his name.
Paul Keating is the latest person to contribute to the foundation, but a less public project has been underway to record the voices of those involved behind the scenes.
The focus of the interviews was policy and politics, and we weren't so much interested in Don's private life.
George Lukowitz worked in the Dunstan Government Policy Unit. For the past few years, he's interviewed more than 100 people who were also involved in the government to find out how and why it all happened.
To get to those people involved in that whole legacy, particularly the positive side, but also to explain some of the things that didn't work and why, or things in progress. So to get that on the record before it was lost.
His hope is the material will enlighten political scholars searching for the lessons of history.
What is it that we need to do to look at how society can change for the better, how we can make sure people don't get left behind by that society? What was the time when perhaps we interrogated that whole issue most incisively? And we think back to the Dunstan decade.
But the decade ended with voters growing weary of him, particularly the poor economic record. Personally, Dunstan endured the death of his second wife and suggestions of impropriety with a gay lover. And in 1979, an exhausted Premier resigned from his hospital ward.
From the interview I did with one of Don's doctors, it was quite clear he was very ill and had to resign at that time, otherwise he wouldn't have lived as long as he did.
Dunstan, I think, marks the beginning of what we might call modern politics, the current era of politics.
13 years after his death, the launch of the oral history collection served as a kind of Dunstan decade reunion, with friends and colleagues reminiscing over a few local vintages. Although none are as well known as the man who made all the headlines, their view of history is now recorded, and although some memories differed, all agreed it was a memorable era.
He was the first, he was a trailblazer, he was truly innovative. I don't think we'll see anyone quite like him. Dunstan is really one of a kind.